Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on this rainy Saturday. Thank you also to Cloth, Community League of the Heights, for setting up this series of book talks throughout the summer. They'll be every Saturday, alternating Word Up and Sisters Uptown Bookstore. We're really happy to be a part of this series. Jackie from Cloth, would you like to talk about Cloth and to introduce everything before I talk about
Sure. Hi. Hello. First of all, welcome to those who are returning and who have supported us in the past. I see like a lot of the same names popping up on each week when we do these book clubs, and it's really very appreciated, showing your support for authors and artists and small businesses. I am a project manager at Community League of the Heights, Cloth for short. They are social services that we've been servicing the Washington Heights community for over 60 years. They are mostly known for managing affordable housing, but they have several programs. They have a pantry, after school. As a matter of fact, Veronica, I think that you're participating in some program with after school. Right now, after school programming. They have the local version right now, or summer youth employment program. They have my program. My program is commercial revitalization. What that means is that I support small businesses. Hence, Veronica and Word Up is, I know, a nonprofit, but also a small business, and Sisters Uptown Bookstore is also a small business. So these are two of the businesses that we're supporting with these book clubs. And as Veronica said, these are running every Saturday, alternating between both bookstores until August 28th. And we're featuring local authors, local artists, and local businesses. And there's a word about the importance of supporting your local businesses right now, your small businesses in our community. I'm sure you know this, but they have suffered greatly under COVID, and a lot of them are struggling. And the more money that you spend locally in these businesses, the more you are helping them to survive. So please consider that the next time you go shopping. If you're buying a pair of underwear, or if you're buying a wedding gown, just please consider shopping locally and patroning these small businesses. And with that, I just want to thank LISC for funding us. Obviously, Veronica for hosting our book clubs, Jennifer from Sisters Uptown Bookstore, Noma, who has been incredibly supportive of this whole project, and Height Sites for supporting our weekly, or housing our weekly registration link. Thank you, Veronica, and everybody.
Thanks, Jackie. And yes, thank you for attending this virtual event organized by Word Up Community Bookshop in conjunction with Cloth. So we're a bookshop and art space run by local residents, many of whom are volunteers. When we're not experiencing a pandemic, we can be found at 2113 Amsterdam Avenue at the corner of 165th Street in Washington Heights, where we're normally hosting events for all ages and selling used and new books in English and Spanish. We hope you'll visit when we are finally open again. We will be posting just pickup hours soon. I also want to mention that we've partnered with the census to remind our community how important it is to get counted. Billions of dollars are at stake for New York City, money that goes to schools, infrastructure, housing, and healthcare, which is a big topic today. We encourage everyone here to take their census at my2020census.gov and to check in with loved ones to make sure they've filled out the census in their preferred languages. Because we don't know when we'll be opening fully and functioning as a store again, we've also started a GoFundMe campaign at Word Up to maintain our space and to meet our obligations while closed. And we'll share that link in the chat in a second. And just about the Zoom chat, we have a chat open that's enabled where you can comment and just show support for something that someone says. If you have a question, though, if you hover with your mouse over this Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see Q&A, and if you hit that button, there's a spot where you can put questions specifically. And we're asking everyone, if you have questions, to put them there so that we can see them more easily. And then, in the chat panel, you can say all kinds of fun things. Emote, give your support to everybody. We are very excited for this conversation today. This is a book event and conversation that we've actually been thinking about for a while. So we're really glad for this opportunity from Cloth to actually just make it happen. Wilhelmina Grant, you may have seen as the featured artist another week through Sisters, but she's also an author and has created a book that is an important book that documents an important experience. And to have her in conversation also with Eileen Fuentes, who's been a friend of Word Up for also many years since Word Up started, is really like an honor for us to have as a pairing. I'm going to share some information about both of the conversants, and then Wilhelmina will read from the book, we'll show some of the images that are in the book, and then they'll talk. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A at any time, but they'll be addressed after they converse. So Wilhelmina Grant Cooper is a self-taught visual artist who transforms found objects and mixed media into assemblage art. As an arts instructor, she uses the arts to nurture the creativity of cancer patients, their families, and staff in healthcare settings. She also guides elderly participants through arts projects at senior centers and conducts art workshops for the general public in her Washington Heights art studio. Wilhelmina was honored with numerous prestigious awards for art: the Black Art Makers Award of National Conference of Artists, the Women's History Month Creative Power of Women Award presented by New York State Senator Bill Perkins, and the Alan Locke Art and Action Award presented by the Harlem Arts Alliance. She was also a NOMA, Northern Manhattan Arts Alliance, 2016 Uptown Art Stroll honoree. Wilhelmina is the founder of SISTA, Inc., Survivors Inspiring Sisters Through Art and Advocacy for Health, an arts-based nonprofit organization which seeks to inform, encourage, and facilitate access to early detection of breast cancer by connecting the medically underserved to free screening information. Using SISTA, Inc. as a platform, Wilhelmina has launched successful grant-funded community projects like Saving Our Sisters in the African American Community and Harlem Fan Initiative and Open Your Eyes Community Arts Project. Her first self-published book, which we'll talk about today, is A Feeling of Fullness, Insights of a Divinely Guided Journey Beyond Breast Cancer, which was first published in 2016. It chronicles the journey from the nearly missed breast cancer diagnosis at age 37 through her present-day life as an artist, author, health awareness advocate, and arts instructor. In conversation today with Wilhelmina will be Eileen Fuentes, a health educator and a healthcare activist, who's a wife and mother of 3 girls, and she was diagnosed with breast cancer at just 34 years old. Since then, she's become a fierce advocate for all women with breast cancer, with a focus on the most vulnerable of cancer patients. Eileen founded and led the free bilingual wellness program for cancer patients in collaboration with the Herbert Irving Cancer Center at Columbia University Medical Center, where she now works full-time addressing disparities in cancer care and using care and communication strategies that are culturally appropriate. She has degrees and certifications in health education, nutrition, and a lot of things, and is a sought-after speaker who has spoken nationally for organizations including Memorial Sloan Kettering, Ralph Lauren Cancer Center, and TED Med Live. Most recently, she was selected as community advocate specifically to provide insights and the perspective and the lived experience of Latinx and other underrepresented patient populations for the NCI-supported SWOG Cancer Research Network, which is dedicated to improving the practice of medicine in preventing, detecting, and treating cancer and to enhance the quality of life for cancer survivors. We're honored to have you both here with us today. And we'll get going with the reading from Wilhelmina.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Veronica, and my thanks, so I don't forget, to Cloth and Noma and Word Up, Eileen, Jackie, Veronica, Carolina, everyone that's made today possible. Noma and Cloth are definitely keeping me busy. I really appreciate it. All right, so I'm going to read a little bit from my book, A Feeling of Fullness. I wrote the book because I wanted something to speak for me. Basically, in the book, I have both ends, the positive and the negative, the upside and the downside, because I'm being very honest about everything. And I wrote the book because I was feeling a little down. I was feeling like, who's going to tell my story? Because I didn't have a husband. I'd never had children. My parents are gone. I have siblings, but they have their own lives. Said, who's going to tell my story? The other part of it is that it was the upside. I want my story to go out further than I can go, because I did a lot of public speaking and a lot of teaching and educating and awareness talks, but I wanted to go even further. So that's the upside of the book. So I'm going to read you a little bit of it. I'm not going to give away all the secrets because I want you to get the book if you can. And here we go. So this chapter, this passage is called Dissed and Dismissed. I was 37 years old and quite the vision of health and fitness. It was the spring of 1994, and I had been practicing karate a few times a week. One day I was in a sparring match, a pretend fight with a fellow student, when I took a really hard punch to the left side of my chest. I kept fighting because I did not want to lose the contest, but I was in a lot of pain. After 3 weeks had passed, I was still having sharp and shooting pains in my left breast. As a practitioner of karate, however, I knew this pain was beyond the ordinary. This was pain that I had never experienced. So while juggling my busy schedule as a full-time flight attendant, a part-time student, and an intern at a downtown museum, I took myself full of optimism and medical insurance to a breast clinic and asked for a mammogram. My request was refused because I did not have a doctor's referral and because I was under age 40. Instead, the medical provider performed an ultrasound and informed me that the constant pain and palpable lump in my breast was a complex cyst. He said I could either make an appointment to have the cyst drained, or better yet, just leave it alone. And for the pain, he suggested that I could apply warm or cold compresses. I will never forget that doctor's words, nor his demeanor. As he patted the back of my hand, he told me, "Don't worry, my dear, it's not cancer. At age 37, he said, you are much too young to have breast cancer. Besides, cancer does not run in your family, and it does not strike Black women that often. Most of all, if a lump is painful, it is not cancer. You really don't have anything to be concerned about." Clearly, he made that determination without the evidence of an investigative mammogram or a biopsy. I was angry, upset, and in severe pain, and left his office in tears. I went to my gynecologist's office to request a mammography referral. Unfortunately, he concurred with the opinion of the clinic that I did not need a mammogram. I immediately fired him and appealed to his associate, who forthwith provided me with a mammography referral and an appointment. I went to a radiology center where they listened to me and did a thorough investigation, which included a mammogram, ultrasound, clinical breast exam, and a needle biopsy. Back in 1994, diagnostic breast biopsies were typically done in the operating room. But fortunately, I was examined by a concerned and talented radiologist physician who performed the needle biopsy in her office that same day. As it turned out, that blow to the breast during the karate practice revealed a growth the size of a pearl, which was hiding on the back portion of the chest wall. The tumor was in that area that was inaccessible and would likely be missed on a mammogram. So if it had not been for that lucky punch, which caused extreme pain, the tumor may have gone unnoticed until it was too late. If it were not for the bold, knowledgeable, and confident radiologist, my story would be quite different. The post-surgical pathology report after surgery revealed a diagnosis of stage 2A infiltrating ductal carcinoma with positive lymph node involvement. And I'm going to skip forward to another part. The reason I mentioned this way that I got diagnosed with the lucky punch being the thing that brought my attention to the cancer is that I always talk about listening to that voice inside, that little voice, that intuition that tells you something. You have to trust yourself and your intuition. And the next portion of what I'm going to read will point exactly to that, the intuition, that little voice that spurs you to do something that's going to be helpful. Okay, so this chapter is called A Fork in the Road on the Cancer Journey. After the second cancer diagnosis in 2001, surprise, I was diagnosed again, but it was okay. I breezed through the healing process. The site of the surgery and hematoma healed, and I was good as new in a matter of weeks. However, I needed time away from working in the cancer community because I felt that I could no longer be an effective spokesperson for breast cancer awareness. I needed to get my confidence back after being re-diagnosed. I continued working as a flight attendant for a while, but the airline job unexpectedly vanished after the events of September 11th. Since the airline that I worked for was directly affected, I was able to, okay, I missed my spot. Okay. I was working as a flight attendant for a while, but the job unexpectedly vanished after the events of September 11th, since the airline that I worked for was directly affected, right? I was working for American Airlines. During the airline layoff, I was still not ready to resume health advocacy work, so I became an executive assistant. I got a job in a nonprofit organization over in East Harlem. And I decided to return to college after a long hiatus after my first diagnosis. I enrolled in community college and registered for the 17 credits that I needed to complete my associate's degree. I graduated with honors and transferred to a 4-year college. So besides listening to that little voice inside and following that, I talk about perseverance, and it really took me a very long time to get through college, but nothing stopped me from going back and getting it done. So within that process, I was able to qualify for a scholarship because the airline job was eliminated as a result of the terrorist attacks of September 11th. Luckily, my tuition and fees were further subsidized by grants and scholarship during the following 2 years of college. Serendipitously, one afternoon while I was shopping on 125th Street in Harlem for curtains for my office, I was compelled to walk into one of the big box stores that had recently opened. That was Marshall's. I had never been inside the store, and although they sold housewares, I did not think they sold curtains. Still, I felt the urge to go inside. Lo and behold, the first person I saw as I stepped off the escalator was a former airline colleague who informed me that as a laid-off airline employee, I was eligible for a grant to obtain occupational retraining for another career or funding to go to college. Shortly afterward, I went to the company's headquarters, filled out the necessary paperwork, and received an educational grant for $10,000, which covered my tuition and books for the remainder of my undergraduate studies. So far I went through associate's degree and bachelor's degree, totally covered. I didn't have to come out of pocket or get any student loans. So last little piece I'm going to read, then we'll stop and do the conversation. As my graduation date approached, I applied to the college for a scholarship to graduate school, intending to study cultural anthropology. As I became busy dealing with everyday responsibilities, I had totally forgotten about the scholarship application. So on graduation day, as I marched into the massive auditorium at Radio City Music Hall, my eyes welled up with tears. I was elated that I would finally receive my bachelor's degree after delays adding up to 32 years post-high school. I was about 50 years old when I got my bachelor's degree. So never give up, never give up. So my excitement turned to disappointment when I searched the program booklet and failed to find my name listed along with my classmates who were also receiving degrees from the English department. I was slated for September completion because I was missing 2 credits. I would earn those credits over the summer though. So for that reason, I was not entitled to have my name printed on the commencement program, even though I was allowed to march with my fellow classmates. So eventually, my disappointment turned to gratitude and joy when my name was announced as a recipient of a generous scholarship to graduate school. And when I arrived home that afternoon, I found the congratulatory letter in my mailbox, and I began my studies in that fall in the Urban Affairs and Planning Department at Hunter College. So I'm going to leave that right there. And I'm ready to talk to Eileen. What questions or comments do you have for me?
Before we do any of that, I'm just super excited to be reconnected with you again. I have a little bit of my own story. The way I even found out about Wilhelmina is that I was leading a wellness program from 2010 to 2016. And I saw this beautiful art in the lobby of the hospital where I worked. And it's so ironic that week after week we were coming in, and all of a sudden all these women started noticing this picture that really resonated with them. And so I looked at the name of the artist and I just Googled you. And so then you were a guest, a wonderful guest twice. And so I'm eternally grateful for that. And also for believing in me, not knowing who I was, just cold calling you. And so it's such an honor to be here with you and also with Word Up, who I am kind of obsessed with. That being said, you, in your excerpt that you read, you were giving a lot of credit to the radiologist who was super skilled, and their credit for doing this biopsy. And so for those that don't know, a biopsy is when they take a small piece of tissue underneath the skin where the cancer is, and they analyze it and they determine whether it's cancer or not. So it does take a lot of skill. And so it is to be commended. But I wanted to bring some attention to some of the things that you did not highlight, because it's something, I work full-time in a cancer center serving breast and GYN oncology patients. Mm-hmm. And there's so much to this advocacy piece because there's so much embedded bias in healthcare. And I just wanted to highlight some of the things that you said, because you said that you first went and had requested a mammogram and were sort of pushed away. And then you went to a GYN who also, without really doing their checks and balances, also kind of said, it's whatever the person before me said. And even still then you came and said, no, I want more. And when you got more, you then went and got a second and third opinion, which is like so completely rare. And working in this field for so long, I just want to say, like, this is exactly what we need, because the healthcare system is really designed in a way to help you, but once you're even heard. And getting to the point of being heard is such an obstacle course. So tell me about what made you keep pushing further and further and further, because I think that there's a lot of women who can really benefit from that, especially women that are under 40 that are told this is never going to happen to you. I was 34, you were 37. It happens. The youngest patient I've ever had is 22. So it happens. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I kept pushing because, as I mentioned, I was a karate practitioner, and that group of women that I practiced with in Brooklyn, we were all about helping each other, helping the community. We didn't do a black belt system where you get graduated based on your skills and fighting and challenging each other. We were always helping each other. So part of what we did as a group that advocated for women and children, learning how to defend ourselves, learning how to fight back, learning how to fight the system, learning how to help gain equality for everyone on every level. That's where I learned those skills of pushing and said, well, wait a minute, if there's nothing wrong, I need you to prove it to me. I'm in a lot of pain and you can't tell me there's nothing wrong. I need to know what it is. And I never thought it was cancer, but I thought, well, there's something wrong. You have got to serve me because I'm the customer. I'm paying you. You're the doctor. You have to serve me. So I also know, well, if I can't get what I need over here, I'll go over there. But I didn't give up. I needed to be persistent. And that's one of the things that we learn in karate, the discipline and the persistence. Keep trying. If you don't get through the first time, try again, try again. So that is what that spurred me on. The other piece of it is that I didn't do it alone. None of this that I've ever done in my whole life was myself. I always go with a buddy, get a partner, and I really suggest that people do that. Get somebody to be your eyes and ears when you go. So you're not there alone, because it's easy to be pushed away when you're by yourself. But when you have a force behind you, some other person to listen and say, wait a minute, that's not right, let's back up. you know, you get.
And also to your point about bringing a buddy, I think when we're diagnosed, we're already thinking about the next thing, and that buddy is there to listen to the details that we missed. So.
Exactly, exactly. So, you know, that's the other thing I meant to say. You know, I'm telling my personal story, but I didn't do any of this alone. It's always been a community effort, and it's always been, in the book, you see that I never went to one chemo appointment or one radiation appointment by myself. I had friends there. People came home with me. They washed my dishes. They helped clean my house. They did my grocery. So none of it is just me, but I'm telling my story about what happened and what we can do to help avoid some of the pitfalls and some of the unfortunate times that people don't survive. And there's been a lot of that too. And that's another reason I do this work. And that's the reason I know you do the work you do, because there's such disparities in the medical community, whether it's just for medical reasons or lack of insurance or fear. That's a big one. That's another thing that I wanted to help women get past, the fear of, oh, I'm going to lose my hair, oh, I'm going to lose my man, oh, I'm going to lose my breast, oh, I'm going to, you know, to get past those fears, oh, it's going to hurt, oh, it's, so we talk about everything, and I address all of it in the book. So I try to really pack a whole lot of information in the book and to soften that information with some beautiful artwork.
Thank you, and thank you for that. It really does soften it. While as women of color, we try to take ownership. We have to take ownership because really a lot of it falls on us because the ears of those in medicine tend to ignore us. And so while there is that piece where we have to be so proactive, and a word that you kept using is persistence. And while we have to be persistent, we also have to be persistent in demanding the respect and the dignity that we deserve. Exactly. And that's a piece that's missing all these misconceptions that there are about us. And I sit in on a lot of these initial consultations, as difficult as they can become. And so, once the dust settles, I think that the first thing that we have to do before anything is to take care of ourselves once we finally get to the point of a diagnosis and treatment. But at the same time, while we advocate for others, we also have to advocate for the respect from the medical practitioners, because getting pushed away because of your age or your race or your ethnicity or this myth about genetics, because it's not a myth for a lot of people, but it's just, we have to be clear that 90% of the cases, about 90% of the cases are not genetic, right? And so, immediately we assume that it's something in the family when indeed in most cases it's not. And so let's switch gears and talk about going back to school, which is something I can relate to because I am currently in school. And so talk to me about your diagnosis. And you ended up getting a bachelor's degree in cultural anthropology. And then you got, I think, your graduate degree in urban affairs and planning. Is that correct?
Actually, I wanted to go and study cultural anthropology, but then I ended up taking English language arts as a major, and it served me very well. It helped me to write the book. Yes,
we're all glad you did that.
But yes, I felt like when I was in this period of non-activity, what am I going to do with myself? Because I've always been very active in areas, and I can't sit around and be bored. So even when I was undergoing chemotherapy, I went down to the local breast cancer organization and I volunteered, because I can't be just sitting there watching TV. I can't. So I decided, why don't I go back to school? So that was one reason I went back to school, because I had the time, and but I didn't have any funding. So I looked into getting grants and scholarships, and there's so much money out there for women, so much money out there for women of color, and they're trying to help rebalance the distribution of monies for different things. So I found some grants that were specifically targeted for women of color, young women, African-American women, women who wanted to study certain things. So there is money out there available to continue the education. So with that in mind, and knowing that since I lost my job, there was money for that too. So I took advantage of that, did my research, and it wasn't easy, but I got it done. And that's
Right, because that was a time where it wasn't so readily available with apps and all these things that,
exactly. I had to go to the library.
oh
But
boy.
but also listening to other people and asking women within my network, well, how did you do it? How did you get through college? What did you have to do to make that happen? So I got a lot of referrals and a lot of encouragement from other people. So that was helpful as well.
And you touched on the theme when you talked about being in the store in Harlem, that it was sort of like something was pulling you into that store. And it was serendipitous that you ran into this person that led you to that funding. And so that's I think, a deeply spiritual experience. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and about following your intuition?
Well, that keeps happening. And I mention it quite a few times throughout the book. That particular day, I was on a mission. I had to get curtains. I only had a certain amount of time. And something said, go into Marshall's. I'm like, nah, I don't like Marshall's. So I went in there and I ran into my friend and she gave me all the information I needed to apply for this grant. And had I just walked on and gone back to the office, I would have missed out on that information because I never saw her again. I went back to Marshall's to tell her, oh, I went to the headquarters and I filled out the paperwork. I never saw her again. I went looking for her. I did not see her again. So that little voice that said, go in Marshall's. And I was like, why am I going in Marshall's? Just go in. And, you know, things like that happen. And from time to time, there'll be a gut instinct that tells me, do this, go that way, call this person, and it always pays off. So, you know, that spiritual aspect of it is like, you know, you have inner wisdom, especially as women. We have what they call that women intuition, that wit and women's intuition.
The tap.
always pay attention to it because there is something there.
And so you talked about being an intern at a museum, but then a lot of your work is inspired by your breast cancer diagnosis. So can you tell me about, I mean, it seems like you started art long before your diagnosis even happened. So what led you to this point where you became this amazing artist that you are?
Well, actually, it happened in the reverse. I've only been an artist now for 12 years. And I was working in a museum, which was a history museum. It wasn't an art museum at all. And I was doing that as part of my education. But I think we are all artists. As human beings, we are all artists. We just need something to pull that out. And the way it got pulled out for me is that I used to go to Art Alliance meetings once a month for my job. And once my job disappeared, I kept going and I was admiring work that other people had done. And I just said aloud to myself, I want to try that. And the artist heard me, you want, I can show you how. And that's how I got started in 2008. So a lot of the work that came out of that was everything that was on my mind at that moment was breast cancer awareness and adding my art to a cause and just sort of spilling out some of the feelings that I had within me and some of the, I don't know if Caroline is around, she can poke some of the images that I sent and put them up. Some of the things that are political, because, you know, we learned that the personal is political. So what has happened to me has potentially happened to so many. And so I started doing art about it. Instead of saying it and speaking it, I was showing it. And yes, that one is called Many Woman. And that talks about how many women, you know, you see she's got the superhero symbols on her breasts and she's standing upright with her toes. She's on her toes all the time. And then you see the cake knife that's going through the breast area. And then the strainer as her head, you know, her head is strained with so much information and so much responsibility. There's childcare, there's the home care, there's job security, there's family support, there's, you know, there's so much. So that piece I used as my primary piece that talks about everything in totality as a woman. This is what it is. And the board that she's on, it's so worn and it's got marks of wear and tear on it. So that is how I spoke to the community about my experience. And it generated a lot of interest. Oh, I like that. And oh, let's talk about it. And there's another one, a breast cancer awareness piece that has a button that was circulating for quite a while from the NC, NCI, I think it was.
The National Cancer Institute.
That's it. And it says, do the right thing, get a mammogram. And what I try to do in my messages is make something very palatable. So what does that say? It says, do the right thing, get a mammogram. So I got the person to look and then to internalize what I was saying. And the piece itself, if you look, you can't see it here, but from the side of it, it's got a mesh on it that looks like a breast. It's shaped like a breast. And so there are keys for her feet, because the key to early detection is, the key to survival is early detection. So there's a whole lot of messages embedded within the work. And I was able to pull that out and put it into something that people can see and walk away with and remember. So, you know, that's kind of how it happened. And it's not me, it's the spiritual aspect. That's how I looked after I lost my hair. And it grew back very quickly and no big deal. Couple of months, no hair. It was very cool because it was July of 1995 and it was hot, so I was cool.
Yeah, that's funny because I've never actually taken a picture of myself without hair. So I just never wanted to remember it. But then once it started to grow back, I maintained it like super, like buzz cut short for 3 years, because mostly it was because of the fear that you talked about and the fear of it coming back. And I was like, well, I don't want to lose. I have a lot of hair. It's really big and curly. And I was like, I don't want to shock people if I have to shave it off again. And so, so if we can talk a little bit about your second diagnosis, where you said specifically that you lost some of your confidence, and it's quoted in your book where you say, I would no longer be an effective spokesperson for breast cancer awareness. What made you feel that way because you had a second diagnosis?
Well, I didn't think that lightning would strike twice. And I was the person that worked for a breast cancer organization. I was the outreach person, and I was the one that would go to the workplace and to community spaces, to churches, and do talks to women and try to convince them about early detection, give them information cards and phone numbers and such. And after the second diagnosis, I just felt like, wow, I feel like a fraud. And that wasn't true, but that's just how I felt. And it took something more work for me to get around that and realize that, okay, well, my message is even more powerful now, because I can say, well, look at what happened, and I'm still going. And whenever anybody asks me about my survivorship, I say right now, 26 years and counting, because I am counting forward. It was one of the low parts of my story, but I found a way to bring it back up, because I mentioned I'm going to talk about the positive and the negative, because we can't say everything is all roses, because we know that's not true. That's not life.
That's not true. Yeah.
So, I deal with the positive and the negative. I turn the negative into a positive if I can. There was an art piece in there that talks about turning lemons into lemonade, and I'd like to think that that's what I did.
Yeah, and I think that there's a place for even the discussion that we have to always be positive, right? Because there's a human moment where you're taking that in, and especially as a woman, you may have children and you may have a job or whatever it is, that we all have our, and positive, because a robot would not. You're allowed to feel it as long as you don't stay in that place, because
Right.
It might freeze you into not moving into the next step.
Exactly.
And that picture that's up right now, so it looks like the cover of your book, is that correct?
It's
and if
the
you
cover.
could just explain that to us about why you chose that specific piece.
Well, in my work, I use a lot of timepieces. Time is very important to us, and time is something that nobody can hoard. We all have the same amount of hours in a day. And you'll notice in my work, I have a lot of clocks and timepieces. That particular one is a memorial piece. The book is dedicated to 13 notable Black women who died of breast cancer at very young ages. And these are people, you know their names, but you may not have known that they perished from breast cancer. People like Fannie Lou Hamer and Naomi Sims, and they're from all walks of life, but they were very notable. So this piece was dedicated to them. and you can't see the entire piece, but it has the wings, like the angel wings. It has the breast, it has the time, it has the gold. And the piece just talks about time and being timely in getting the care that we need. And it's also a memorial piece to those women. And I feel like out of the 13 of them, only 4 of them lived past age 60. And that is just mind-boggling to me, that they could have made so many more contributions to our lives if they had lived longer. And the list is in the book. I'm not going to go through it right now, but well, maybe I'll name a couple of them because I have it right here. Some women who are in the exhibition are Fannie Lou Hamer, as I mentioned, June Jordan, Hattie McDaniel, Audre Lorde, Minnie Riperton, Naomi Sims, Rosalind Cash, Roxy Roker. And the thing about that is that they have a common thread. Every one of those women, those African-American women who died of breast cancer at age 60 and younger, were trailblazers, and they were the first to do what they did, or the only person to do what they did. We've never had another Fannie Lou Hamer. And all of these women died of breast cancer. And I'd like to think that there could have been a way for them to have lived longer if they were detected earlier, or if they had had better treatment, or if there were more types of treatment available, because we do know that we have in our community a disparity in the triple negative, which is hard to treat. And there are just so many different things. It's just so involved. And I don't know the answer to all of the situations that happen behind each one, but these very high profile women, if they didn't survive breast cancer, it's like, wow, we really have to do something. So all of us, it takes all of us to pull together and know that we have to get information, that we have to be advocates for ourselves, that we have to be advocates for each other, that we have to, and not just for breast cancer, for any illness, because we are at the top of the list for mortality for all of those things. So, you know, for diabetes, or for high blood pressure, or for cancer, or for so many things. So it's not just breast cancer, it's health awareness in general, for men and for women. Did we freeze? I think we got a little bit frozen. Oh, okay, here we are.
I think Eileen might have had internet something.
Oh, golly.
But maybe, oh, Eileen's coming back.
Okay, there we are.
Yeah.
All right, I think I'm back. Sorry about that. I don't know, my internet just dropped. So this is the new normal that we live in.
Oh yeah, that happens.
So now I'm talking to you from my phone, but I should be able to get back on. All right.
Perfect.
So one of your pieces is actually one of my most favorite quotes from Martin Luther King, where he says, "Of all forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane." So is there anything that you can talk about, some of the low points maybe that you mentioned before? How did that resonate with you, and why did you turn that into a piece of art?
Well, he made that quote, I guess, more than 45 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, and it still hasn't changed much. It's still something we have to keep in the forefront of our minds. And I was just talking about when you dropped off the call about, it's just not only about breast cancer awareness, but we have so many disparities in healthcare in general that we need to address. There is an image in there with a pregnant woman, and just the other day, a woman in Brooklyn, 26 years old, passed away right after childbirth due to, she had an emergency C-section or something, and she didn't survive. And I did a piece of art about that talks about at the time I did it, out of the entire world, the United States is only number 78 in top results of positive results, that we are not even the best in the world. We're number 78, and that's pretty low. So it's across the board, health and health disparities, and that's the one that again, with the timepiece, and yes, so many women lose their lives for reasons that are unnecessary during childbirth or right after childbirth, from preventable complications. And someone that saw that piece interpreted it as being me. They said, oh, that's you. They have one breast and you have the skull and crossbones on the navel. That means you had poison in your body from the chemo, so you couldn't have a baby. And, and I was like, well, no, that's not what I did, but you're right. So it's really interesting how the perception of what the viewer interprets the piece as, that's how art really works. And you talked about the spiritual aspect of it. All of that is in play right now.
And there was another image that you had titled "Grace Under Pressure," and it I'm the proud mother of 3 African dancers, and that picture looked very inspired by that art that comes from Africa. Is that correct? Or if you can tell us a little about that.
Grace Under Pressure also has two sisters. I was walking around, I work in found objects, things that I find in the street, things that are given to me, things that I pull from the kitchen. And that particular piece is made from a crushed can. I think it had oil or tire fix solution in it, but it was smashed. It had been in the street, I guess, for years. And I found 3 little cans at the same time outside of an auto repair shop in Chinatown. So I picked them up and I held on to them for about 3 years until they worked their way into art. And the piece, I made the piece because it reminded me of a time when I was under so much mental and emotional pressure. For instance, when I was trying to get the diagnosis of whatever it was that was wrong with me, I didn't know it was breast cancer, but just the mental and emotional pressure that I had on my head. I couldn't stop moving, but I had to move forward. So that was the look that I thought, that was the feeling that I had. It must have looked like that, how I just kept going, but I just really had my teeth clenched, and I was determined to find out what I needed to find out, but that was the look. So when I showed that piece at an exhibition, it flew off the wall as a sale within the first 10 minutes.
I could see that.
And I wish I had kept it, but I want my work to go out into the world. I don't want to be my best art collector. So I'm glad somebody has it, and that hopefully they're showing it and talking about it and thinking about it, and that it has its impact.
And as an artist and author, can you just walk us through the process that you went through to make this book, and then after you discuss that, if you can tell us a little bit more about how you go about doing your artwork?
Well, the book is a compilation pretty much of my story and stories that I have written throughout the years. And what I thought I would do is put it together with some artwork that reflected each page or each paragraph. So that was really what it was. And I wanted to tell my story, the negatives and the positives, and I wanted to add the artwork with it so that people could get a visual. And I needed and wanted something to tell my story. The way I went about it, it is self-published, which was a very difficult process. The writing of the book and the editing was not nearly as difficult or stressful as the actual publishing piece. I thought I was dealing with a company in the United States, but they were actually overseas, in the Philippines, I think it was. And back and forth with, I guess, dealing with the English translation, I was having difficulty explaining exactly what I wanted. So we went back and forth 100 times with editing changes to the actual layout of the book, and that took an extremely long time. Although the book is printed in the United States, I did not know that their operation was overseas. So just because of language barriers, it was a long and difficult process to get it done.
And what about you? What was your process? Did you like wake up and start writing? Did you dedicate an hour a day? Like, can you tell us about that process? Because I feel like there's so many women that want to tell their story, but they don't really know how. And so I just think that, you know, as somebody who used self-publishing successfully, even with you know, the bumps in the road, but how did you go through that process?
Well, at the risk of sounding really kooky, again, that was Spirit. The Spirit said, "Where's the book? You're supposed to be writing this book. Where is it?" So I got busy writing the book, and I just focused on it every day. I started pulling together some of the writings that I had done previously, and I wrote new pieces, and I started assembling my story. And it took me about 3 solid months, every day, writing, editing, pulling together pictures that I thought would fit in with the story. And then after that, just to get permissions from people whose pictures appear in the book, I had to go to that person and get a written consent in order to use their picture. Luckily for me, most of the images are my own, so I didn't have to get permission. But anyone that had taken pictures for me of my art, I had to get their permission to use their photo image in the book. So that was time consuming as well.
And so the art. So how did you, I mean, I know you said that you talked about how you find these pieces and had some mentorship. How do you go about the process of being an artist, and what kind of offerings do you have? Because I know you do a lot of offerings right in our community.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I have a collection of a mishmash of stuff in my art studio, and when I go in there, I have no idea of what I'm going to do. I just start pulling things together and mixing and matching, and when something resonates and I get a certain feeling, I say, okay, that's the piece. The workshops that I do for the community are not this, because I use power tools and I use hardware, so it's not necessarily a safe workshop for me to offer to the general public. So I do other things with the public. I do things with paper and glue and fiber and clay and other soft things that don't involve using hammers and saws and drills. So my process is a lot different from what I teach. And the other thing too is that what I instruct is something that everyone can do. So I want people to walk away from a workshop with a feeling of accomplishment and something that they can do within an hour, hour and a half, that they can feel proud of, and that they can actually pour their feelings and their emotions into. And you'd be so surprised with the seniors that I work with and the breast cancer survivors, or the cancer survivors in general that I work with, what kinds of images they pull forth that they didn't even realize that they had within them. And when they're done, they feel so much better than when they started that particular art piece.
And if we lived in a perfect world where there wasn't a global pandemic, where could people go to you to be able to take part in these activities?
Well, I have a workshop space, a studio space on Amsterdam Avenue at 159th Street. It's not on the street level, so I would have to be contacted via email to make an appointment. From time to time, I like to do community events, and I have usually an e-blast list when I'll send out a message to the community that we're doing workshops on certain days, and hopefully eventually it'll get more participation. But I will continue to do that once we're open again to having groups come through in person.
And in your book, you talked about the challenges of breast cancer, one of them being lymphedema, which is swelling in the arms after surgery to remove the breast, or in some cases when they remove a large portion of the breast. Can you talk about how that has impacted your work?
Well, I was diagnosed with lymphedema 14 years into the process. Sometimes it happens immediately for people. Sometimes it does not happen at all. But for me, in year 14, I started developing a swelling in the arm. And it's something that's controllable, wearing, I don't have it on now naturally, but wearing a compression garment during the day, and then another different compression garment for sleeping, and then to do the manual drainage a few times a day is all that's needed to keep the swelling down. It's uncomfortable if the lymphatic fluid gets built up in the arm, but there is a way to alleviate that by doing manual drainage. And that's taught by the occupational therapist. So I went through a process where I learned how to do manual drainage in order to get some relief from any discomfort.
Okay, so I think we should open it up. Thank you so much, Wilhelmina. This has been really great to talk to you again. It's been a long time, but I think that there might be some questions from some of the listeners, and so I'm open to hearing some of that.
Absolutely, let's go.
Anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A panel that's at the bottom of the screens. One other thing that I'll do in the meantime too, while everyone thinks of questions, and thanks so much for the conversation. It's been great. I mean, the back and forth, there was even a mention in the chat. I don't know if you can see the chat, Eileen, because you switched formats, that you're an excellent interviewer and should consider having a rate talk.
I'm watching everything, but you can't see my face because I'm working off from my cell phone as I try to resolve these technical issues.
Okay. So I'm gonna also, in the meantime, introduce, we'll take this time to introduce Julann Gebbie, who is the featured artist for today. Let's see if this all works. So Julann, we're gonna see if, sorry, and in the meantime, people, if anyone thinks of any other questions, feel free to still put them in the Q&A. But in the, there's been a lot of appreciation in the chat for the conversation that's taken place, and for the story, and that it's, that it's inspiring to hear of the determination. And I think just knowing that people are in a community and having similar experiences and hearing about it has been great. So now that we are here joined by Julann Gebbie, let's take a moment to have a, yeah.
I am a potter who lives in, Washington Heights, Inwood. I originally came to New York from the Midwest, from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, study acting, go to NYU, and, I did have a little acting career up until my 30s. Then I got married, had children, and that sort of takes your focus off yourself. But as my children got a little older, I discovered a pottery studio at the West Side Y on 63rd Street, and this is back in 2002, and I haven't left it since. So as my children grew up and on their way, I gave more and more of my time to the studio, and eventually my apartment just was overwhelmed with pots. And I had to start thinking about, I need to sell and to keep this going. So I started to take on commissions, and eventually I moved out all my books and filled my shelves with pots, and started to make whatever I saw in the world, to me, looked like it could be some sort of pottery. So I really moved more into that direction, and then started to participate in local art communities such as the Northern Manhattan Arts Alliance and Artists Craftsmen of New York. And I helped develop the pottery studio at the Y on 63rd Street, just to give them more of a connection to the community and a chance for people to sell. And it's been very hard during this pandemic to not be able to go into the studio anymore. So I recently took my daughter's bedroom, and she hasn't lived at home for a while. Got rid of the bed and bought a pottery wheel. So I'm, trying to, keep my passion for clay going forward. And when I think of the things that I like to make, I like to make things that you wouldn't think of as your traditional pots, in earthenware colors. I like to do things a little more stylized, that where I can paint. So I do enjoy painting. So I do like to do a lot of black and white or bright colors, but the piece I'm sharing with you all today is a part of a collection I put together last year, which was all basically black and white. I find black and white really looks visually compelling together, and I came across the shape of the gourd, which is the large and rounded bottom with the tall, slender neck, and I liked painting them with the teardrop and disguising the stem of the teardrop into and behind all the other teardrops. And I think when the piece is finished, it makes for a visually striking image, which is, with the little video that shows my work. Voila.
Wow. This is exciting. Maybe this is the time to, is this the time to draw names then? This is
So,
oh, for the winner of the, that's the piece that was at the very end. That's the piece that is being raffled off.
Right.
I have all of the registered attendees here. You are not in the audience. I think it's we've done at least the last event we did, and I know that at least the first Sisters one, it was if you were in the audience. Is that how we want to keep it, with Jackie, or names that?
I think they need to attend, yes.
Okay, all right. So Cyrus? Is Cyrus here? Nope. Okay.
No, Cyrus.
Elizabeth Starcevich? Elizabeth was here. Oh, this happened another time too, or Elizabeth was here, got something, and then she commented too.
I think, yeah.
Does that count, Jackie?
I
We
think
did
so.
go past 3 o'clock, so.
Well, yay, Elizabeth.
Well, okay. All right. I don't know if is Ken gonna join us? Is Ken the person, Jackie, that is from?
He hasn't. It's okay. I think you could. He's not in the participants. So I think you could speak about that also.
Okay, we're also raffling off a gift certificate, $50 gift certificate, is it?
$50, yes, it's for Fort Washington Public House. They're located on Broadway. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact address. It's Broadway and 165th Street, right across from Mitchell Square and across from New York Presbyterian Hospital.
And the winner is Jerome.
Hey, I saw Jerome there.
Yep. Okay, so can Jerome pick it up from the cloth office?
Jerome, you could, I think what's best is I have it, you could email me or give me your email and then we'll arrange it that way. How's that? Where's Jerome? He was here. There he is.
Hi,
Hi, Jerome, you just won $50
Thank
gift
you.
certificate.
thank you.
Jerome, could you give me do you have an email? If you can give me your email, we can make arrangements for you to pick it up or I can mail it to you, or it's probably better if you could pick it up though.
Okay, I can pick it up.
You want to put your email in the chat?
Okay,
And also with Elizabeth, I think I have Elizabeth's email, Veronica. I'll look.
Okay.
She's been a consistent attendee.
Okay, great.
I can either deliver the piece to her directly or bring it to you, Jackie, whatever works best.
I think, let me communicate with her. It's probably better only because it's a fragile piece of work.
Yeah.
I think it would be better if it was picked up from you directly.
Perfect.
Rather than, chance something happening in transit.
Understood. I agree. I hate shipping pottery. I prefer to hand it off to somebody directly.
Okay. Well, thank you. I see that there were some questions for both Wilhelmina and also for Julann. So I don't know if we have time for a few more minutes to ask the questions. And I know that some of them have been answered off list, but maybe people are wondering what the answers are they're not all in the Q&A. The Q&A questions were whether Wilhelmina works one-on-one with clients, which I know that you've answered, but in case anyone else was wondering, maybe you want to let people know.
Absolutely. Sure, I love it. Yes. please. Should I put my email in the chat so people can know how to reach me? All right, let me figure that out one quick second.
And then it looks like Joanna is wondering, hi Joanna, if what's next for everybody? You know, what is, you know, what like a future book might be if you were going to write another book, and then also Julann, what work you're doing currently.
Well, I am actually currently working on a collection that I'm calling Watercolors, because this past year I did the whole black and white series that I thought I would go into something that was a little more splash of colors. So it's you know, reds and pinks and yellows and oranges coming together on a pot. I once the pot has been bisqued, I spray it with a lot of water so that when I add the color to it, the color will just spread like in a watercolor painting. And it has more of an abstract look, but it's, I have, in the studio right before it closed for the pandemic, I had 18 pieces on the shelf just ready to go into the kiln. And, you know, hopefully they'll still be sitting there when we come through the other side. But, you know, now that I'm having to work from home, you know, I just got a wheel the other day, and I'm going to have to start moving forward. You know, you can't, that's the downside of a community studio, is in a situation like this, it's not available to me. So I have to look for other solutions, you know.
Yeah, and Wilhelmina, I know there was a question about book, whether there's a future book, but also you have the studio access has been something that, you know, we've conversed about the past couple of days too, especially at a time like this.
Yes. Well, yes, another book is in the works. It's mostly in my head right now, but definitely I want to do an art book. I've had an exhibition called Kitchen and Curb many times, and I'm going to take Kitchen and Curb and make a book out of it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for being with us today. There's contact information in the chat if you want to follow up with the artists, and also I'll be emailing the first 5 registrants so that you can get a copy of the book. And if anybody else wants to purchase a book too, Carolina had earlier dropped a link into the chat. But feel free always to just email us at info@wordupbooks.com for any other questions, and also and Jackie too is in this chat, and she can also connect you to, you know, put you on her mailing list for all of the future sessions that will be with both Word Up and Sisters Uptown Bookstore. So thanks so much, Wilhelmina, and to
Thank you.
And to Jackie, and to Carolina, who's in the background here helping with
Thank you, Carolina. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
So much.
Wait, can I just say who's next week's author is going to be? Next week, it's with Sisters, with Jennifer Wilson with Sisters Uptown Bookstore. And our author is Minette Coleman. The artist is Evelyn Suero, and the business is Sweet Life Pastry.
Beautiful.
So please attend. If you want to email me for the Zoom link, you can. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure I have a lot of you on the mailing list, and you get it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Veronica.